Chapter 3, The Joyful Table, Lessons from Epicureanism, featuring Epicurus, Lucretius. Let's be honest, the phrase joyful table doesn't always describe a dad's dinner experience. There's a good chance someone is crying. There's a decent chance something is on fire, or at least overcooked. There's a 100% chance that if I try to sit down, someone will immediately need ketchup. And yet, oddly enough, this is exactly where Epicurus would begin. The ancient Greek philosopher has a reputation for indulgence. The very word Epicurean is associated with gourmet food, fine wine, and lavish tastes. But that's a caricature. Epicurus wasn't a hedonist in the way we use the term today. He didn't teach excess, he taught ease. He didn't glorify gluttony, he prized contentment. His ideal meal? A bit of barley bread, some cheese, and good company. In other words, Epicurus might have been happiest sitting on the floor with your toddler, sharing dry cereal and giggling over a silly face. He believed that the highest pleasures were the simplest ones, and that the deepest joy came not from adding more, but needing less. Sound like a contradiction? Try eating a cold sandwich while your kids laugh uncontrollably at the table. That's ataraxia, the calm, lasting happiness Epicurus believed in. And it might just be the joy we overlook every day. Epicurus taught not in the bustling agora or the ornate academy but in a quiet garden, a space of peace, beauty, and simplicity. He called it the garden, and it was radical for its time. He welcomed women, slaves, and outsiders into his philosophical circle. Something almost unheard of in the Athens of his day. At the center of his teaching was a phrase many of us dads might want to tattoo onto our forearms. Do not spoil what you have by desiring what you have not. It's easy to nod at, it's hard to live by. Especially in an age of social media comparison, parenting blogs with curated snack trays, and an ever-expanding list of shoulds and musts for good dads. Fatherhood brings a non-stop stream of unmet expectations. The dinner you imagined becomes a food negotiation. The bedtime routine devolves into a blanket tug-of-war. The family hike becomes a mosquito-bitten mutiny. Epicurus would say, want less, delight more, let go of the script. Be present to the version of life you're actually living, not the one you hope for in your head. He believed three things were essential for happiness: friendship, the joy of meaningful connection, freedom, the ability to live simply and without fear, reflection, the practice of understanding your desires and realigning your soul. Fatherhood, when approached with intention, can offer all three, if we're willing to receive them. The dinner table can be a battlefield. Food gets flung, milk gets spilled. Someone cries, sometimes it's you. But for the Epicureans, the table was sacred space. Not because of the food itself, but because of what it symbolized. Connection, gratitude, belonging. They didn't toast the flavor of the wine, they toasted the presence of their friends. For Epicurus, a joyful meal was less about what was served, and more about who was present, and how they shared it. So, when your child tells a joke that makes no sense and then bursts out laughing, that's joy. When you sit and ask, what was your favorite part of today? That's reflection. When you clink plastic cups and say cheers with apple juice, that's celebration. These small rituals, repeated, imperfect, and real, are where happiness hides. Lucretius, an Epicurean poet writing centuries later in Rome, believed that much of human misery comes from fear of loss, fear of pain, fear of death. But he didn't advocate denial or distraction. He believed that understanding the nature of things, truly seeing them as they are, could free us from those fears. And in a strange way, parenting offers a crash course in this. We can't ignore fragility when we hold a newborn. We can't control outcomes when a child gets sick, or when the house fills with chaos, but we can practice seeing clearly, letting the mess be the mess, and the moment be enough. Dadfail #06, the melted joy. Once, I tried to recreate an intentional family dinner I saw in a magazine. I grilled, I lit candles, I even bought cloth napkins. The kids screamed about the green beans. The dog jumped on the table, the napkins were used as capes. I ended the meal standing alone in the kitchen, scraping macaroni off the floor. I had wanted something beautiful, something elevated, something that looked like peace. But Epicurus would have told me, stop aiming for Instagram, start noticing what's already good. The laughter in the background, the fact that we're together, the moment, not the performance. A slower feast. Epicurus wrote tender letters to his friends, many of them filled with encouragement. Some of them sound almost fatherly in tone. Practice these things, and you will live like a god among men, not in the sense of power, but of peace. What would it mean to feast more slowly on the life we already have? To savor sticky smiles, peanut butter sandwiches eaten cross-legged on the floor, or the feeling of a sleepy child curled up on your shoulder. It's not the food, it's not the photos, it's not the Pinterest version of parenthood, it's the presence. The joyful table isn't perfect, it's full of noise, full of life, full of something real. And if Epicurus had ever joined us for dinner, chaos, ketchup and all, I think he'd raise a plastic cup, grin at the mess and say, this is enough. In our house, the dinner table is a crash course in limits. There's only so much food, only so much time, only so much patience. Epicurus didn't shy away from limits, he saw them as essential. To desire everything is to enjoy nothing. He once wrote, "If you wish to be rich, do not add to your money but subtract from your desire." That's a bit of a challenge in parenting, where desires multiply like socks in the laundry. The desire for quiet, the desire for cooperation, the desire for kids to eat something, anything, green. But Epicureanism offers us a surprising pivot. What if we saw these limits not as obstacles to joy but as its birthplace? There's a kind of moral imagination that grows when a dad chooses to rejoice in what is, rather than pine for what could be. It's not passive resignation, it's active gratitude. Epicurus believed that pleasure and virtue weren't opposites. In fact, he insisted that wisdom, phronesis, was the guide that helped us distinguish true pleasures from harmful ones. The dad who learns to enjoy a lukewarm coffee while watching his kids chase bubbles in the yard isn't settling for less. He's seeing more clearly, the paradox of peace. One of the great surprises of Epicurean philosophy is that it's less about pleasure as ecstasy and more about pleasure as absence, specifically the absence of pain and anxiety. The Greek word is ataraxia, often translated as tranquility or untroubledness. Ataraxia isn't found in noise-canceling headphones or weekend getaways, it's found in reordering our desires. When the toddler melts down because the cookie broke in half, and we're tempted to match their energy, ataraxia invites us to breathe instead of react, to let the storm pass without letting it pull us under. Epicurus didn't say parenting would be easy, but he might say it's easier if you let go of the need for it to be anything other than what it is. Garden time and the gentle reckoning with mortality. Epicurus taught in a garden, not just as a setting but as a symbol. Gardens grow slowly. They respond to care, rhythm, and restraint. They're never perfect, and yet they feed us. Fatherhood, too, is a kind of gardening. You can't force it. You can't rush it. But you can show up, get your hands in the soil, and trust that something good is growing, even when it looks like chaos. In the garden of parenting, you learn to love the seasons. The early days of planting, sleepless, tender, uncertain. The wild sprouts of toddlerhood, every emotion, every direction, all at once. The tangled vines of adolescence, growth you don't always understand. The pruning, letting go, and eventual harvest, glimpses of who your child is becoming. Epicurean wisdom doesn't demand that we control the garden. It invites us to delight in its rhythms, to find serenity in the waiting, and joy in the ordinary. Lucretius and the fear that steals our joy. One of Epicurus's most passionate students, the Roman poet Lucretius, devoted his life to dismantling fear, especially the fear of death. In De Rerum Natura, On the Nature of Things, he argues that death is natural, not something to be feared. He writes, "We are all born from nature, and to her shall all return." Fatherhood, ironically, is a constant brush with mortality. Every scraped knee, every growth spurt, every birthday is a reminder. This won't last. They won't stay small forever, and we won't always be here. But Lucretius helps us see this not as cause for despair but for wonder. If we're not promised forever, then what we do have is sacred. This bedtime story, this car ride, this goofy inside joke. In letting go of the illusion of permanence, we hold more tightly to the moment. It's a paradox. When you accept that everything is fleeting, you start to live. So what does this actually look like? Here are 3 small practices drawn from Epicurean values that can turn your day from frantic to full. A daily thankful bite. Take 1 bite during a meal, just 1, and savor it on purpose. Say something you're grateful for aloud. If your kids are old enough, ask them to do the same. Let the table be more than transaction. Let it be ritual. The friendship check-in. Epicurus considered friendship central to happiness. Text a friend, invite another dad for coffee, laugh together about your mutual chaos. You weren't meant to do this alone. The nothing extra night. Pick 1 night a week where you do nothing productive after dinner. No work, no dishes, no screens, just Legos, stories, or a blanket on the grass. Epicurus would approve, a night in the garden. It was a Wednesday night. Nothing special. The kitchen smelled like reheated chicken nuggets. My daughter had a paper crown on her head. My son was wearing a sock as a glove and calling himself Captain Toast. I was bone-tired, the kind of tired that makes you want to scroll aimlessly or disappear into a podcast, but instead I sat down at the table, no phone, no plan. "Cheers," I said, lifting my water glass. The kids clinked back with milk and apple juice. Then came the jokes, nonsensical, repeated, weirdly loud. But somewhere in that noise I noticed something strange. I was smiling. It wasn't a grand moment, no one would post it, but it was real. And it was enough. That's when it hit me. This was the garden, not a metaphorical one. This table, this ordinary Wednesday. The kind of space Epicurus might have carved out between clay walls and olive trees, where friends gathered not to impress, but to be. The Epicurean life isn't something we build when everything's calm and tidy, it's something we notice in the middle of the mess. And sometimes the mess is the gift, a word on pleasure. Modern life often reduces pleasure to indulgence, screens, snacks, distractions on demand. But Epicurus meant something richer, pleasure as tranquility, the absence of disturbance, the ability to be fully at peace in your own body, your own home, your own life. That kind of pleasure doesn't come from consuming, it comes from presence. And here's the radical thing Epicurus might whisper to you in the chaos of your living room. You don't need more. You already have enough. You just have to see it. One more dad. Fail, the too fancy picnic. There was the time I tried to surprise my kids with a beautiful picnic. I packed crusty bread, little cheeses, berries and lemonade in glass jars. We got to the park, and one child immediately fell in the mud. Another dropped the glass jar on the ground. The bread was weird. Everyone cried. I ended up buying fast food on the way home. And still, when we got home, we ate on the porch. We laughed a little. The lemonade, in plastic cups this time, tasted just fine. Epicurus might have raised his eyebrows at my original plan, but I think he'd approve of how it ended. Not fancy, just together. Epicurus didn't write a parenting manual, but his teachings translate surprisingly well into one. Here's a short field guide. Not exhaustive, not perfect, but drawn from the heart of Epicurean wisdom, as it might be lived by a father with ketchup on his shirt and love in his eyes. 1. Less wanting, more noticing. The more you fixate on what's missing, the tantrum-free dinner, the quiet bedtime, the clean floor, the more happiness slips away. Epicurus would remind you what you have is the miracle. 2. Presence is pleasure. Pleasure isn't escape, it's attention. The look on your child's face when they tell a story. The sound of their feet running through the hall, the absurdity of their knock-knock jokes. This is joy if you let it be. 3. Fear distorts fatherhood. Fear of failure. Fear of being inadequate. Fear of time slipping away. Lucretius warned us that fear twists our perception and steals our peace. Let love be louder than fear. 4. Share the table. Epicurus treasured friendship. Fatherhood isn't a solo act, it's a circle. Share meals. Invite neighbors. Say yes to help. Build little communities of joy. 5. Practice enough. You'll be tempted to chase perfection. The perfect birthday party, the perfect schedule, the perfect dad persona. Don't. Practice enough. It's more than sufficient. It's sacred. A note on the journey. So far in this book, we've stood with the Stoics in strength. We've wrestled with identity, with duty, with courage, and love. Epicureanism doesn't contradict that. It completes it. It reminds us that the goal of all this effort, all this striving, is joy. Not the fleeting thrill of success, but the steady gladness of being alive, of being a father, of being here. Chapter summary. The Joyful Table. Lessons from Epicureanism. Epicureanism invites us to rediscover the happiness hidden in ordinary moments. Far from being a philosophy of indulgence, Epicurus taught that true pleasure comes from simplicity, friendship, freedom, and reflection. For the father, this means slowing down long enough to savor the sacred chaos of home life. Dinner table absurdities, knock-knock jokes, mismatched socks, and the warm presence of a child's laughter. Epicurus and Lucretius challenge us to let go of what we fear and what we crave, and instead practice enough. In a world of pressure and performance, the Epicurean father learns to feast on the now, not the life imagined, but the one right in front of him. This chapter reminds us that joy isn't somewhere else. It's already here, if we can pause long enough to taste it. Reflection box. Practicing Epicurean fatherhood. Where is your joyful table? What everyday space in your home holds potential for connection and contentment? Who are your companions in the feast? Epicurus saw friendship as essential to happiness. How are you nurturing friendship, with your kids, your partner, or your peers? What do you fear, and what might you release? Lucretius taught that fear clouds our joy. Are there fears of failing, of missing out, of being inadequate, that you can gently set down? What would it look like to savor more and strive less today? Joy doesn't arrive by grand design, it unfolds in paper crowns, spilled milk, and stories told between bites. The good life, Epicurus says, may already be waiting at your table.